A forward bomb just dropped on the Philadelphia Eagles, my friend. And it did not come from any insider. It did not come from any anonymous source. And it did not come from any behind-the-scenes report. It came from the player himself. The same receiver who spent months being described by Philadelphia fans as a victim of a limiting system, as an elite athlete who deserved more targets, as a leader who tried everything to make the team better, opened his mouth on his first major podcast as a Patriot and said something that completely changed the narrative of everything that happened inside the Eagles organization over the last 2 years. He admitted it, without hesitation, with a smile in his voice, that he did it on purpose. What he said exactly, why the admission fundamentally changes how the Eagles' behind-the-scenes saga needs to be reread, what this means for Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia organization looking back, and why this statement could be the most complicated legacy this receiver leaves in the city that loved him for 4 years. You are going to understand all of it right here. If you are a true Eagles fan, hit that like button and subscribe right now because this is the most explosive statement to come from a former Eagle in recent memory. Days after being officially introduced as a New England Patriot, following the June 1st trade that sent a 2028 first-round pick and a 2027 fifth-round pick to Philadelphia, the receiver appeared on the 7 p.m. in Brooklyn podcast and said something that no Eagles fan was expecting to hear at this moment. He did not use vague language. He left no room for interpretation. He was direct. That receiver is A.J. Brown. Brown's words were the following, and they need to be repeated with the precision they deserve. It was done purposely to give us Eagles a push. He knew that if he said something to the media, it was going to propel the team to work harder. And then, without hesitating, he completed the thought. If you say what you need to say to the media, which he will not do anymore, it gives everything legs and pushes everyone to be better. Because pressure is not always a bad thing. It can be a good thing. And he felt like it was okay to do. 4 seasons, 2 Super Bowls, 5,034 yards, 32 touchdowns, and now, a confession that forces anyone who followed this offseason to reread every headline, every insider report, every anonymous statement through a completely different lens. When Diana Rossini of The Athletic described the relationship between Brown and Hurts as functional and professional, citing anonymous sources, the dominant narrative was that the locker room was speaking for itself. That players dissatisfied with Hurts' system had found a channel to express genuine frustration. But Brown just confirmed that at least part of what reached the media over the last 2 years was deliberately placed there by him. Not as a spontaneous expression of frustration, as a calculated strategy to create public pressure on the team. The distinction matters enormously. A player who vents to a reporter in a moment of genuine frustration and information leaks is one thing. A player who consciously decides to use the media as an instrument of pressure on the very franchise, on the very quarterback, on the very coaching staff is something else entirely. Brown did not just do the second thing. He admitted he did the second thing. And he said he felt like it was okay to do it. The phrase that is going to reverberate over the coming weeks inside the halls of the Jefferson Health Training Complex is the last part of Brown's statement, which he will not do anymore. That addition is the implicit acknowledgement that the outcome was not what he expected, that the public pressure he deliberately created did not produce the effect he imagined, that the push he tried to give the team had consequences that he now recognizes went beyond what he intended. This is not a formal apology, but it is a self-correction that says more than any polished excuse could communicate. For Jalen Hurts, this statement carries a particular weight. For months, the quarterback was portrayed as the central problem of the Eagles' offense. Anonymous sources described a hesitant quarterback who did not trust tight windows, who distanced himself from the receivers, who did not invite Brown to the voluntary throwing sessions. And while part of that portrait certainly reflects the genuine perception of people inside the locker room, another part was deliberately amplified by a player who now admits he was using the media as a pressure tool. How much of the narrative that surrounded Hurts over the last 2 years came from genuinely concerned sources, and how much came from a calculated process of creating public pressure? That question no longer has a clear answer. But there is also a more generous perspective on what Brown described. He did not frame the strategy as sabotage. He framed it as leadership. The idea that creating public pressure on a team can force a positive response, can make players and coaches wake up to problems that were being ignored internally, is a leadership philosophy that some coaches and elite athletes have employed across the history of professional sports. The difference is that this philosophy generally works better when the athlete using it has enough authority inside the organization for the pressure to be interpreted as accountability rather than disloyalty. Brown clearly could not make that distinction work in Philadelphia. The pressure he created, rather than producing the collective push he imagined, fed a narrative of division that ultimately became the primary legacy of his final 2 years with the franchise. The market, the insiders, the fans, and the front office read the signals he was sending as irreconcilable internal conflict rather than productive tension. And the trade he wanted to avoid, the relationship with Hurts he tried to preserve on the foundation of a childhood friendship, ended up being exactly the destination that the narrative he created made inevitable. The most powerful irony of the entire situation lies in Brown's own words about what he will no longer do. A receiver who used the media as a pressure instrument for 2 years in Philadelphia arrived in New England and declared that he is going to adopt a different approach. Quieter, more focused on the field. Mike Vrabel, the head coach who already extracted the best from Brown in Tennessee without needing locker room drama to create motivation, will certainly appreciate that statement. And Drake May, the young quarterback who will share the field with Brown in the 2026 season, will benefit from a version of the receiver who has learned the limits of his own leadership methodology. For the Eagles as an organization, Brown's statement arrives at a moment when the franchise is trying to build a new chapter around Jalen Hurts, Sean Mannion, and a completely rebuilt receiver group. The confession does not solve any of the real problems the Eagles' offense had in the 2025 season. It does not answer whether Hurts will be the quarterback who rises above the criticism in 2026. It does not confirm whether Mannion's outside zone will work better than the previous system. But it removes a layer of ambiguity about the origin of part of the negative narrative that surrounded Hurts and the Eagles' offense, and that carries real value for a franchise trying to rebuild trust inside the locker room. Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman will not respond publicly to what Brown said. That is the posture of a professional organization in the face of statements from former players. But internally, the confirmation that part of the media pressure of the last 2 years was deliberately created by the receiver will be processed in a context far more nuanced than the public coverage of this offseason allowed until now. Brown arrived in New England with the dream that the childhood photo in the Patriots' number 12 jersey revealed to the world on Monday. He is going to play for Vrabel. He will have Drake May as his quarterback, and he will try to build the chapter he himself described as quieter, cleaner, and more focused on football. But before that next chapter writes its first sentences, he left Eagles fans with a statement that is going to accompany the memory of this offseason for a very long time. With A.J. Brown admitting he deliberately leaked stories to the media to create pressure on the Eagles, and saying he will not do that anymore as a Patriot, what is your reading of this statement? Does it change the way you see what happened inside the Eagles organization over the last 2 years? And do you think Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia organization come out of this confession with their narrative improved or damaged in the eyes of the fan base? Leave your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe to the channel. I'll be back later with the latest Eagles news.